This is going to be a very interesting matchup as Michigan heads on the road to face 3-0 Nebraska in the first Big Ten game of the year. And this will be truly Michigan's toughest test since Oklahoma. Now, obviously, I do think Oklahoma's a better team than Nebraska, but coming off of a 63-3 win at home against a Central Michigan team that obviously isn't nearly as good as this team, going into Nebraska is always a tough game. Now, obviously, Nebraska has been down the last couple of years, but we've seen what Michigan did in the last away game against a better opponent, in my opinion, than Nebraska. But you have a Nebraska crowd that once it gets behind its team and a team performs well, it is really, really difficult to win. And there's a few things in this game that I think is really leaning towards Nebraska, giving them a little bit of a favor in this game. There's a few reasons why I think Michigan might be as well. One of the biggest reasons, though, is this offense for Nebraska and Dylan Raiola. Dylan's been great this year. He has about 800 yards passing, a little bit more than that, 8 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Now, obviously, if you looked at the teams that Nebraska has played, they've played Cincinnati, they've played Houston Christian, they've played Akron. Not obviously the best of opponents, but you love seeing the 0 interceptions. He also been completing 72% of his passes, averaging a little over 275 yards per game. He's been doing everything he's needed to at the quarterback position. He needs to continue to do this in this game. Now, he's not a guy that's really going to be a threat to run per se. He only has a net 19 yards on the season. So he's going to be a little bit more of a pocket type quarterback. So that's going to be one thing that's going to kind of keep an eye on in this game. Can Michigan get pressure on Dylan Raiola? If he does, what exactly will be his response to that? But if they don't get pressure on Dylan Raiola, they're going to have to deal with a guy named Dane Key. I think Dane Key is the best wide receiver. 3 touchdowns on the year. He averages 14.7 yards per catch, 190 yards per game as well, which you look at that and you're saying, well, that's only 63 yards on average. But look at really the opponents that Nebraska has played. You really haven't had to throw the ball too much. Like, you really haven't had to play your starters a ton in these games. So that's why I think Dane Key is going to be really a key matchup in this game for Michigan to kind of keep an eye on for. If Dane Key can get going, this offense for Nebraska is going to be able to drive down the field. But they also do have a little bit of a running game, and really their leading rusher is Emmett Johnson. He has 326 yards on the year, 4 touchdowns, 47 yards, about 108 yards per game. Now, if you look at Michigan's strength, obviously it's the run defense. This run defense for Michigan has been really good throughout this year. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Nebraska and their run game overall. If they can kind of improve on that and continue to kind of get about what they have been doing, I think that's going to really play a key factor into what this offense for Nebraska does. Now, they've been averaging 176, almost 177 yards per game on the ground. Now, if you look at what they're doing through the air, it's drastically different. It's 366 yards. So even if they don't necessarily get going on the ground, do I think it's really the biggest concern for Nebraska? No, I truly don't. I think obviously you would love to get a run game going throughout this game. If you can do that against Michigan, that's great. But if you don't, you still have wide receivers, you still have tight ends, you still have Dylan Raiola. You still have a ton of talent on this team that should be able to put up points on this Michigan team. They've been almost averaging 49 points a game. Now, against Cincinnati, they did only score 20, which in my opinion is probably the best opponent they've played. But that was also week 1. Like, they've improved. They've gotten Dylan Raiola going. They've gotten other guys going as well. I think this Nebraska offense will be better. I believe they're like 5th in scoring, which obviously when you're playing Houston Christian and Akron, that kind of makes sense. You're scoring a lot of points. This Michigan defense will absolutely be better than anything that Nebraska has faced. But I do think there's a ton of talent around Dylan Raiola. I think this offensive line is going to continue to get its job done. I truly think it's up to this Michigan and the secondary to continue to improve on what they did against Central Michigan also need to continue to improve than what they did against Oklahoma, because obviously defensively they weren't necessarily the greatest against Oklahoma, even though they weren't necessarily too bad. So I think that really plays a little bit of a factor into why Nebraska might win this game. I also think Nebraska's defense, especially the secondary, they're one of the best secondaries in the country. I believe they're rated like number 1 pass defense in the entire country, at least. Yeah, I think it's right up there. Obviously, again, with the opponents that they have played, is anyone truly surprised about that? Not really, but you have an offense in Michigan that was much better against Central Michigan than anything we have seen as of recent. Now, again, it is Central Michigan. I've talked about in the recap how much can you really take away. Now, one thing and one really factor in this game, especially with Biff Poggi being the interim head coach, his second time will be his last time as well. It'll be interesting to see how much Bryce Underwood uses his legs. I think that's going to be something that he's going to have to do in this game. I think they're going to have to continue to unlock this play calling for Bryce Underwood. I think that was a big issue for Michigan in their game against Oklahoma. You kind of see a little bit of a different type of offense last game. I think they're going to have to continue to do that, because if you can use Bryce Underwood in the running game, if you can also run the ball effectively as well, which Michigan has been doing, that's one of the big factors in why I think Michigan might be able to win this game, because you look at what Nebraska does defensively. Number 1 in pass defense. But when you look at run defense, it's a little bit more vulnerable. It's 75th. That's not necessarily great. Now, is that anything to say like it's awful? No, not necessarily. But what does Michigan do best, and what have they been doing the best for the last 5-10 years? Running the ball. You have a guy in Justice Haynes. You got an offensive line that obviously was better. I think they still need to grow. They still need to be better. But if you're going to win this game, it's going to be about running the ball against this Nebraska defense. If they can run the ball against this defense, that is going to help Michigan offensively in this game. I think they're going to have to do that. I think they're going to have to get Justice Haynes going. I think they're going to have to use Bryce Underwood's legs. And if you can do that and open up the pass, it's going to be a lot easier for this Michigan team to score offensively. Now, again, if you can't do that and Nebraska stays on the field and gets stops, that's obviously going to be a little bit more difficult. But I'm going to continue to keep an eye on this run game. I'm going to continue to keep an eye on how much they hold back Bryce Underwood. I think if you're Michigan, I think it would be best to push all the chips in the table for Bryce Underwood. Just push him all to the center. Give him the playbook. Let him play. He's going to make mistakes. This is an away crowd. You've already held him back in one opportunity in an away game. You cannot do that here. If you want to reach your goals, you have to win this game. And this is an atmosphere, and this is a crowd, then when they get going, it's really, really difficult to get going again offensively. If Nebraska starts out strong, this crowd is going to go absolutely nuts. And when you have a freshman quarterback, that's when things can get interesting. I think what Michigan has to do is they have to get Bryce Underwood comfortable. They cannot hold him back like they did against Oklahoma, and they have to be okay with and accepting that he might make some mistakes. And I think that's truly what Michigan does best when it comes to its offense. I think you have to run the ball, but I truly think you cannot limit what Bryce Underwood's going to do. Because if you limit what Bryce Underwood's going to do, there's a real possibility that Michigan loses this game against Nebraska. Now, again, because of your run game, do I think it can affect this game too much if he does turn over the ball? Or do I think he's going to have to do too much in this game? No, not necessarily. But for your future, I think it would make sense to allow Bryce Underwood to do what he needs to do, throw the ball, use his legs, take shots down the field, do what he does best, do what he did against Central, and Michigan will probably win this game. But with that being said, this Nebraska team, I think, is getting things on the right track. Matt Rule has always been good in his third year. It's always taken 3 years to kind of get things going. You can see the pieces that this Nebraska team has. This is going to be an absolutely huge game for Nebraska. So who's going to win? That's the question. That's what I'm going to answer right here. I think Michigan wins this game. I think Michigan goes on the road. I think they don't hold Bryce Underwood back like they did against Oklahoma. I think this team has learned its lesson. I think Nebraska stopping the run struggles a little bit more than they can afford. I think because of that, the pass defense might not be as good as it has been. I think Michigan just does enough offensively to get this a win for them. Do I think it's going to be a really close game? Yeah. Do I think this could be an absolute blowout in either way? Possibly. I would feel a little bit more comfortable with maybe a Nebraska blowout than a Michigan blowout, just because I think with a rookie quarterback, it's that difficult to do on the road. But with all that said, I still think Michigan wins this game, and I still think we'll get a moment or two from Bryce Underwood. And I think because of what happened against Central, because of what happened against Oklahoma, I think this coaching staff has learned a little bit more under Biff Poggi, and I would be really interested to see if they look really good offensively, if they continue that with Stroh and Moore, or if they kind of go back to the play calling that they had prior to Oklahoma. If they do that, I think that would be a drastic and a big mistake. But in this game, you don't have to worry about that. And even if you don't necessarily go that way, I think Michigan offensively with the running ball might be just enough to get the win in this game. But yeah, that's a preview for Michigan, Nebraska. Hopefully you enjoy this episode. If you did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, let your friends, family know. Definitely will do a recap for their next game as well and talk about this game too. And yeah, thank you for tuning into this episode, and make sure to tune in to the next ones.